Okay, righto.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome to all of you, and thank you for joining us today. I am your host, Leila Nahawi. I'm a member of the Women Empowerment Committee founded at Eibfs. I'm a learning and development professional with experience in the banking and automotive sectors, with banking being really close to my heart, like many of you here know. Our agenda for this session is going to be so I'm going to take you through the agenda very briefly. And just before I start with that, I'm really honored to be moderating the virtual edition of the annual HR Banking Forum titled Learning Resilience in the Disruptive World. Our agenda will include a little introduction by myself, and I will then hand over to a very special guest that we have joining us all the way from the UK. We will then give you a glimpse at the annual training plan for next year, and I think that is something I'm really excited about myself. After which we will hand over, just before closing, we will hand over to our inspirational leader, Mr. Jamal Al-Jismi, General Manager at Eibfs. I hope everyone's doing great, and I hope you're as excited as I am about the session. So I'd like to talk a little about the technology and specifically in the digital sphere. We've always been talking about how the disruption has been caused by that. It has been a subject of interest. And we've always put efforts in trying to adapt to that. However, these times have been challenging us on different levels, not just with our ability to communicate or to work using the new ways or the technology, but also with our lifestyles. There has been a major shift there, and also the amount of skills that we had to acquire all in a very short span of time and all at once. What we once thought was an adoption curve has actually become an adoption rocket. So I would like to encourage you to continue using the chat functionality, and feel free to even post your comments or share thoughts there. In fact, just before I proceed further, it would be really nice to know which banks you are representing today and what departments, so that also gives us a really good understanding of who we're talking to today. So if you can just mention the name of your bank and the department you're representing today on the chat, and make sure you select all attendees and panelists when you are typing. Amazing. Thank you. Thanks, Haya. So amazing, really interesting. So yeah, we have a wide range of audience today. Thank you, Inas and Amira, for sharing. Awesome. Thank you. Thanks. Nice to see very familiar names with us in the session today. Thank you so much. Amazing. And we have lots of experienced bankers who could be at different sectors at this point in time, but with banking experience. So moving on with our session today. So like we said, disruption was not really limited to technology in the digital sphere. And what we once thought was an adoption curve has actually become an adoption rocket. Our forum, like we said, is titled Learning Resilience in the Disruptive World. But let's start by defining what is resilience. Thank you for all of the people sharing with us in the chat. It's wonderful, a really wide audience here. So resilience is the process of adapting well in the face of adversity. Of course, it helps us endure and thrive. Now, what we believe at Eibfs is that learning agility, which is the ability and willingness to learn, and then apply that learning effectively to prevail, even in unfamiliar situations, is what works well or helps us handle situations we don't know without being prepared for them. So the only way really is to keep acquiring learning that will help us in situations that we might not have experienced before. And I'm sure all of you have experiences to share where you yourselves have tried new things, forced in fact to try new things, and they worked out, not just worked out, but actually worked out extremely well. And I'm sure all of you have lots of examples to share with us. So actually what I'd like to do here, if you allow me, I would like to actually present a poll to you. You should be receiving, you should be seeing a pop-up rather on your screens, and I'm just gonna launch a poll here. There's gonna be a statement, and we would like you to let us know what your thoughts are. So feel free to put in whatever you think, whatever you feel rather. So I'm gonna launch a poll now, and you should be able to see it now. So I'm gonna allow you some time to put in your thoughts and tell us what you think. And it's really fun actually seeing it from my side, because I see how the changes are appearing in the polls. Really interesting. So we have around 20 votes in and more coming. Amazing. Amazing. We'd really appreciate everyone, and even panelists, feel free to vote here. It would be lovely to see the percentage of differences in agreement and disagreement. I'm just going to give everyone a few more moments. Awesome. So I'm going to end the poll now and actually share the results with you. So the statement was creativity is always about thinking outside the box. We have 67% who agree and 33% who disagree. Amazing. So thank you for participating in this poll. And actually, I'd like to share a few thoughts. Of course, there's no right or wrong here. It was just seeing how everyone felt about the statement. So thinking outside the box is really a popular idea. And however, there's a really interesting thought that triggers me to think differently here as well. What if creativity isn't thinking outside the box? And what if it's thinking differently about the box? So if you ever watched a child play with a refrigerator box, and you would see how this refrigerator box could become a car or a robot suit or even a tunnel, or even look at Legos. They're nothing but really these little boxes or variations on stacking boxes. When you think of all the simplicity involved and actually the limited options or choices, that actually unleashes the power of creativity. So I really found this thought interesting, and I thought I would like to share it with all of you today. So maybe thinking of the box differently could unleash our creativity. And like I mentioned a while ago, you've all had experiences where you had limited choices in the past few months, and I'm sure you made the best out of them. In fact, maybe they are your new ways of doing things because they have worked so successfully for you. I would like to share, just before handing over to our special guest, I'd like to share with you wise words that resonate really well with the new world. Um, I would actually like to echo Alvin Toffler's words, a renowned writer and businessman. He said, "The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read or write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn." With that, I'd like to hand over now to our special guest, and allow me to introduce our special guest just a little bit before I hand over. Our guest is Mr. Simon Culhane. He is the CEO of the Chartered Institute for Securities and Investment and has been leading it since 2004. Previously, he has worked with a number of blue chip financial companies and in central government. Prior to his current role, Mr. Culhane worked as Director, Chairman's Office, Global Investment Banking at Deutsche Bank. Early in his career, Mr. Culhane received his professional banking qualifications with Lloyds Bank plc, undertaking a number of roles, including Senior Group Manager, Retail Banking. A Chartered Fellow of the Chartered Institute for Securities and Investment, Mr. Culhane received his education at St. Paul's School, London, and the University of Surrey. I am so excited to welcome you, Mr. Simon Culhane, our keynote speaker of the session, joining us all the way from the UK. And I'll hand over to you now, Mr. Simon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just need to make sure you can see me. Can you see me okay?
Not yet. We can see your picture. Yeah, we see you now.
Right, good. Well, thank you very much for inviting me. It's good to be here in the morning. Of course, for me, actually, it's a bit early. It's 7 o'clock, and believe it or not, it's still dark outside here in London. And I think the very fact that I'm talking to you so easily and so normally now is a reflection of just what this change, this pandemic has caused us. We can all now use Teams, use Zoom, use Skype, use lots of different platforms very quickly. When we think about the concern about people about having whether they have digital skills, and actually I'm part of the task force looking at this for the UK about digital skills, and there's a lot of great concern about whether people can actually learn enough and will they have digital skills equipping us for the next 10 years. Well, actually, we've seen a really rather good example of how quickly people have adapted. Now, one or two people saying you can't see me, but actually my video, I think, is actually running. Perhaps the organisers might be able to just check whether there's a technical problem. Anyway, let me start by sharing my screen. I'm going to talk a little bit about resilience. And I've been sent a lot of questions by your colleagues. They gave me 4 sort of exam questions, which was, can you tell us what is happening in the L&D and HR environment of the firms that where you operate in? And indeed, we've used that to go and talk to them and find out a bit more. So we will be presenting some of the results about that, and we'll have time for some questions. Now, I still think I see in the chat there's a little bit of problem with the pictures, but don't worry, we're going to share a screen, and then actually you won't be able to see me anyway, because we're going to share some slides. So let me just check that you can see what you can see. Can you all now see my first slide? I'm going to take that as a yes. Thank you very much. Right. Okay, good, good, good. Thank you very much. It's great. One of the disadvantages I know we've all found about having a Zoom or a Teams is you don't actually get much feedback. It must be what it's like talking to the radio. So great that you're using the chat, because that does actually give me a bit of feedback. Okay, so I'm going to spend just a few minutes sort of positioning who we are and how it all fits together, and then talk a bit about some of the lessons that we've picked up from other firms that we can share with you. So fundamentally, the Institute is a professional body, which is a slightly strange British institution, but actually we're a global body. And we're an organisation that has a royal charter that actually is a not-for-profit. In fact, we are technically a charity. And it has really 3 main functions, which is to help people by setting standards for professional excellence, helping them have continuous learning, and promoting integrity and trust. It's what we call the 3 pillars of professionalism. Now, in terms of the numbers of the Institute, you can read from the screen yourself what we are. The sort of headline numbers to take away there is 40,000 people in a normal year. I have to say this year is perhaps not normal. 40,000 exams are taken every year, and we have about 45,000 members. 25,000 are fully qualified, 20,000 are students. And we have quite a decent sized staff, 170 staff, of which 2/3 are in the UK and about 60 or 70 are elsewhere. Now, I thought it might actually be useful to play you a 60-second video, literally 60 seconds, which I think probably will save me 5 minutes. So let me see if I can get this little video to run. Can you hear this okay or not?
Not very much, Mr. Culhane. It's really low.
Okay. Well, we'll skip the video. It's only, as I say, 60 seconds, but you get the picture from you can see the pictures that we're talking about here, and we're just making the point that the institutes are fairly global, and we provide examinations across the world. And we actually in the Middle East we started in Dubai, and so we've been in the Middle East operating throughout the Gulf states for the last 10 years. Right, let's move on. So, as I said, what is a professional person? And I think this is we define a professional person as anyone who has the combination of knowledge, skills, and behaviour, those 3 component parts. And that means we often have to debate about whether a banker can be a professional person. And actually, having been a banker for the last 25 years, or for 25 years in my life, the answer is yes, if you have all those 3 elements. It doesn't matter who you are, actually. You could be a professional if you have got knowledge, skills, and behaviour. And behaviour is a particularly important part. That's about putting the client first. Now, we operate, as I say, across the world. You can see the countries of the colour are sort of orangey. That's where we are. And we have plenty of people working in our offices. Right. Now let's get down to business and look particularly at what has actually hit us, because we have had one of the world's most virulent pandemics since the Spanish flu just over 102 years ago. And it's called COVID-19, of course, because it actually was officially recognized just about in 2019 in December. And if you look at this particular graph here, I think this sort of shows you the number of cases. And of course, it's also showing you the number of deaths. Now, as you can see here, we've got wave 1 and wave 2, and we are nowhere out of it. Although, of course, the great news that we've all heard in the last 2 weeks about the various vaccines that are working or likely to work or have worked with their 94 and 90% efficacy rate are extremely encouraging. And that does allow us to start planning now for next year with an element of certainty. I suspect many of you who are writing plans or had to write plans last month, may have found it quite difficult to predict when will things return to some sort of normality, and indeed what is the new normality. And one of the things we've learned in talking to firms is that actually there's going to be quite a lot of new normality when it comes to learning and development. Now, in terms of the Middle East, the coronavirus pandemic has been, frankly, as bad here as it has been in other places. Though, of course, I don't think anywhere it can be as bad as in the US, where they seem to adopt a very laissez-faire approach. But I mean, the pandemic is a very good example of governments wrestling with the health of the economy versus the health of the nation. And it's quite a dilemma for politicians to make. You really want to have a little bit like Goldilocks. You want to have a little bit of one and a little bit of the other. Squeeze one side and the other one suffers. And as we've seen a bit with the second wave, as various countries around the world, including the UK, have revived the economic health of the country, it's been at the cost of the national health of the people. So you put a lockdown in place and bingo, what happens? The economy dies. So it's a very, very difficult tightrope that people are walking. And I think it is extremely good news that we have seen the viruses coming to an end, or at least the vaccines promising that the virus will come to an end. And you've seen, therefore, significant rises in confidence and stock markets across the world. Now, in terms of how bad is it? Well, actually, between the UK and the UAE, it's not that dissimilar. If you look at the actual cases per 100,000, in confirmed cases, it's pretty similar. But in deaths, the UK is far, far worse. And actually, part of the reason for that is the age profile of the country. The UAE's age profile is considerably younger, and COVID is a disease that hits the aged. So if you are 60 plus, the odds start to increase very much against you. And if you're in the 70s and 80s and you get COVID, you've got as high as 10 to 15% chance of dying. Whereas if you're young, under 30, frankly, it's negligible. In fact, there's no recorded case of a under 20 person dying who hasn't got significant underlying problems. So the virus is has definitely affected people in a different way. It has made a much higher death rate in the UK, but it has, of course, made us all particularly fearful. And we did, of course, change quite dramatically as a result. As all the lockdowns came in, and I know that you had significant lockdowns in the UAE as well, but there's some quite interesting data in London. Many of you, I'm sure, have been visitors to London, and you know the London train and the tube network. You're seeing that dropping now down to 7% of normal for 93% drop. So very, very significant difference. And so people had to adapt. And it is exactly as Layla was saying. We're talking about the change cycle, the change curve, and we've got, in her words, a change rocket, and we probably have. So it's a modification. The disaster response is really a modification of the classic grief cycle. So you start out with a little bit of wonderment here. What's on earth happened? Can you move quickly? I mean, you just think, how fast did everybody have to move from suddenly seeing this virus coming till a few days later, lockdown, go home, don't come to work. Did everybody have kit? Did everybody have the ability to work at home? We had to adapt. There was a feeling of a comradely spirit. We would refer to this in the UK as the Dunkirk spirit. You have a common adversary, and as a result, you bind together. So there is some pretty much, as the standard chart would say, a fairly heroic session as everybody beats the odds. They get together. And then as we start, I think the realization dawns, actually, this isn't quite as much fun. We miss the office. We miss seeing people. We miss the creativity. We put up with having little screens, not having a proper screen like at work. We don't have the privacy that we used to have in the office. We've actually got family and other people to look after. It's difficult to get food. All the complaints about what you can visualize and remember when we started into our lockdown period. But in terms of L&D and in terms of the office, we all know that we had to survive. There was no case of just sitting there. And that's exactly what L&D and HR departments did around the world. They said, actually, we can make this work. And funny enough, we quite like it. And that actually is the message that we've got back today. It was exactly like that. People struggled, they rushed, they invented, they were creative, they thought outside the box, they thought inside the box, they thought differently, and they like it and they're not going back. And let's have a look at that perhaps in more detail. So firms definitely adapted well after an initial period. I think the first few weeks, possibly even the first few months, it's been about reassurance. And we'll come a bit later back to that term reassurance. HR particularly is keen to, one of the functions of HR is definitely now at the moment to reassure people. But firms are welcoming the opportunities and seeing that actually working from home provides and deals with one of the big issues of our time, flexible working. Very helpful for diversity, very helpful for women inclusion. And suddenly the firms that were saying, well, we can't have people working at home, we can't have flexible hours, are actually rethinking their policies. So not only do we have an L&D change, we've actually got a cultural shift in how people work change. We've all embraced, as we are doing now, various different medium, various different platforms. And I guess a phrase that I heard from our Indian president, which I just love, is geography is history. And that's absolutely right. We now use the internet, which just avoids all physical borders. We talk to everybody wherever they are, with one possible exception. The Great Firewall of China is alive and well. But practically everybody else, well, I think we have live demonstration today. You can pick up the internet, you can watch what you want, where you want, when you want. Geography is history. And let's take a look at some of the actual quotes from various people we've been talking to over the last few weeks. I've just highlighted a couple of things there. So initial concerns over the impact of virtual delivery have faded and given way to new possibilities. I would say that's a good summary of nearly about what everybody else said. Initially thinking about it, go back to that graph about grief, concern to start with, and then actually this works. A few more interesting, incisive points here. Blended learning. We're beginning to see, and this is beginning to come through in various other elements that people are talking about, bite-sized learning, and TED Talks and other things where people can have what they want. It's almost the sort of Google generation here. What's available, when can I have it, on demand, almost at the user's choice rather than anybody else's choice. And we see that coming back in a bit later when we talk about some of the roles for L&D. But another general point, leading firms, and I think that's true, are very much welcoming the opportunity, not just for L&D, but actually for the whole business. So it's one of those cases that you've been thrown into the swimming pool, you sink or swim, and most people are swimming quite vigorously and quite well and enjoying it. And when we look at different trends, what are we discovering? Well, one element that people are saying is that they want sustainable learning, and that basically means evidential learning that they can use with greater credibility. So they want a qualification to show people that actually they've got some sort of certification, they can move around and do things. And we're certainly seeing, if anything, an increased demand for certification in our environment too. But firms want that, their people want that, and that's becoming even more so. But as I said, another really interesting point is about the bite-sized learning. And I think this is quite a significant trend here. The 3 or 4 firms mention it in different ways. You know, one described it as the Netflix, i.e. you have a large amount of content and you let the user choose. Another one calls it resources more than courses. It's the same thing. It's effectively what people want to get access, information immediately and now to help them with the job this minute, not necessarily about a job they're going to do in the future. And I know from my children, I have 4 children, and I know that if I get stuck or I ask them anything, they usually come up with the answer about a minute or 2 later, and they seem incredibly knowledgeable, and they're in their 20s. And I often say, how do you know that? And Dr. Google has come to the rescue, or Dr. YouTube has shown them how to do something. So The younger generation, today's generation, I think I'm past of yesterday's, but today's generation want and have access to digital content. And actually one of the challenges for the L&D is to remain relevant, because you can find content very easily. Curation of good content is where actually the differential is going to be found. Now, in terms of learning, the last few months has seen an acceleration towards trends we already knew. Gamification, I think, would be a good phrase. In other words, make the learning fun. I can remember that there are some extremely good games around that teach people, some strategy games. I remember one particular game called Civilization. Some of you may have actually played it. Certainly some of my children, their entire knowledge of the world has come from playing that game. And many of the L&D people are telling us at the moment that games that are interactive, that are fun, have got a much higher retention element. And that's of course because most people are active learners. Far greater majority of people are active learners, particularly younger people. And so something that stimulates them, something that tests it, something that keeps their attention. And we all know the legendary attention span of people these days. BBC and others will tell you it's 8 seconds. And some of them say it's even less than that. If you can't keep people attended and interactive and engaged, they become bored and they lose the impact. So gamification, acceleration of that. Another interesting point that made by a couple of people is what they call the flipped classroom. And this basically says that actually you do the online reading in advance and you just have a discussion, the content, the softer elements, if you like, the higher value stuff with the classroom, but the learning is all done individually, which is perhaps different to what it used to be. And various learning portals such as Moodle have been cited by a few people. Other things in terms of HR, what is the HR? One of the questions that your colleague Seth has set me to answer was, what is the role in HR in terms of learning and development, and how do you measure the effectiveness? Well, I think the last answer first. I think the problem about effectiveness is the same as we've always had. It's quite difficult to measure colleagues' effectiveness in the short term, and even harder to assign direct proportionality to the input for the output. So I think that one remains as much of an enigma as any. Effectiveness still measured in some respects by firms by annual engagement surveys and completion of objectives, and probably objectives are better than the annual engagement survey, but it is still difficult to actually get a complete cause and effect from training, and as it is frankly from advertising. But HR's role over the last few months has actually been a lot more about reassurance than perhaps has been previously credited. In times of crisis, people need leaders. People need leadership and leaders. And to be a leader, you need to have vision, integrity, sincerity, and you also need to have the ability to communicate. Now, communication is one of the casualties, but HR has picked up the slack. And in many cases, the HR departments were telling us that they were running most of the communication. The main man or woman may talk once or twice a month, but it's the HR that are doing the day-to-day. And interestingly, the HR were putting themselves forward in the places we were saying as really much more involved in reassuring people than before. Support and reassurance has been one of the lessons for HR, one of the attributes that they've been doing. Now, online is definitely here, and it's definitely a huge part. But like most things in life, it's not binary. Certainly online is a greater part of learning, but it's not exclusively. And I think actually what we're also seeing is blended learning much more. So online is part of it, but it hasn't replaced face-to-face training, though face-to-face training certainly is going to be reduced. And when we look about how organizations have changed, face-to-face sessions are going to be much more structured and much more centered about the softer skills rather than necessarily technical content. So you're going to be talking about the creativity and the collaboration, influencing, impact, communication, those sort of what we call soft, but anything but soft, they're actually quite hard to get effective. Those are probably where we're going to see continual demand for face-to-face learning. But a lot of the technical stuff is moving online. And nobody is talking about mass return now to lots of face-to-face delivery. If anything, it's embedding the digital content more and more. So we do have a significant structural shift. And not a surprise, really, when you think about how people are now looking at the offices, because this is the other big change. We are going to see a huge difference in how people use property. So, and that, indeed, that has big implications for Dubai and others, where the towers reach high into the sky. And we, in London, we work in one of the most prestigious buildings, the Walkie Talkie building, which is the very large building in London that actually is bigger on the top than the bottom. Now, we've done, like many other firms, actually, we've actually now sublet our building. We've sublet about 40% of it, because in future, we believe that the office is going to be used really for 6 C's. And you can see them on the screen there: communicating, collaborating, having a common culture or creating a common culture, cohesion, coaching, and creativity. And that, amongst that element, we've got to ensure that there is some fun in there, some chat, perhaps our 7th C. But the office is going to be different. Communication, creativity, collaboration, and coaching. I mean, coaching, that's what people are coming in for now in an office. So we are going to see great significant changes. Now, you can just see our building in this slide. Our building is the last building on the right-hand side of the slide. But we do see the offices of tomorrow, in fact, I would say 2021, they're going to be far less fully staffed as they were. And people are coming into the office to do work, to meet colleagues, to communicate and be creative. And that is where the L&D side has a large part to play. Because when people come to the office, they want to be creative, but do they know how to? Do they know the best ways of doing that? That's where we see a significant change. And in terms of what we are doing, we're not actually a training provider per se, but we do an awful lot of work, which we provide for free for members, which is to help them with continuous learning. And we've been using bite-sized e-learning topics. We call them professional refreshers. And these bite-sized topics are very popular. In fact, we've seen a significant increase in resources being used because they're very focused, half an hour on particular topics. People buy them when they need them, use them when they need them. In fact, if you're a member, you get it for free. And this has been, many L&D people are telling us that this sort of style is what they're going to be using. And L&D are also saying they're not going to be creating their own content, they're going to be curating it. So they realize that the net and the pandemic has actually shown there's an awful lot of resource out there. Content is quite easy to find on technical basis. It's the curation of it and then working it and molding it into conversations and teaching it. So I think there is my brief summary. Those are our our pictures there you've got of our key members and all the things they do. So the element is I'd leave you with is this is a systemic shift. We've gone round the change curve. People have enjoyed, but first of all, they were surprised by and shocked by the change. They've adapted well to it and they have rocketed, to use Layla's word, they have rocketed to a new norm and we aren't going back. So let me come back to myself. Happy to take some questions and discuss a bit further.
Thank you very much, Mr. Culhane. That was awesome. I relate, if you allow me to just share this very quick experience. Yesterday, we had one of a kind experience where we had to actually launch something on a company level. We have over 40,000 employees, and considering the times we're currently at, it was just so challenging to think of how we could do it. And it was so simple. We found out that we actually managed to run the session in parallel. So we ran a classroom or workshop-based session, as well as online session, and we had a few of us coordinating the event between managing the chats and questions that were on the online platform, as well as the ones that were raised in the session. So we actually had the best of both worlds, and it was really awesome. So yeah, it's interesting what we've been trying to do to manage within the resources we have.
I think you're quite right. I think we've all adapted significantly. And I was at a meeting the other day. I say at a meeting, of course, no one goes to meetings these days. I was participating in a call on the skills gap. And this has been a great concern for the UK. They set up a number of task forces. And the sort of consensus is that we've probably advanced 3 to 4 years in about a few months' time. We have rapidly done things that we thought would be 3 to 5 years even out. we've adapted so quickly because we've had to. I mean, that's the other part. The imperative is there. We were chucked in the proverbial swimming pool. We had to sink or swim, and we've all swum.
Absolutely. And astonishingly, yeah, we've made it. We have a really nice question. I think we have room for one question. We have a question from Badria, Mr. Culhane. How can we make, so you've mentioned elements of how we can make the learning engaging and more interactive. And the question is around that. How can we make it more interactive and informative? So without compromising on the information, especially that, like we know, we've moved into a virtual learning arena and we are missing the face-to-face interaction.
Yes, well, I'm not a great expert on gamification, and we're actually quite behind on what we're doing, but I would say for boys, males particularly, something with a leaderboard, something with a challenge, something with a timer really does engage them. The competitive streak comes out. So even if it's you give people some questions, how fast can you answer them, what's your score, and you put some sort of leaderboard up, that in itself just encourages a little bit of extra edge. So anything where there is a feeling of little competition and a feeling of recognition, that seems to work particularly well for some group. I mean, as I say, it's a gross generalization, but we do find that males, particularly a lot of males, young males, I mean, if you look at the gaming value of the gaming sector now, it's just phenomenal. Billions and billions of pounds. Microsoft Flight Simulator was only outdone by Fortnite and Call of Duty. The PlayStation 5 is launched today. It'll be just phenomenal. So the gaming sector is huge, and if you can actually use some of the tricks and the tools in that, and I do think that anything that shows some sort of leadership, a leaderboard or competition, and you change it every day, but people just like to beat their last score. And that's another thing. If you just say, okay, your score was X, you can do better. I think that actually acts as a little bit like the personal best, like running, just a little target that helps people just get a little bit more interested.
Thank you so much. That's really interesting. And it reminds me of also the sports watches that keep tracking our performance, and every time we do better, we're actually encouraged to do even more.
Exactly that. That's the same principle. Exactly that same principle. You can put that into some sort of learning. I think that we know that it works well. And as you say, the sports watches, or indeed other things that tell you your pulse or your weight, it's that constant reminder and reinforcement. So anything on those lines, I think will yield dividends.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the amazing keynote, Mr. Culhane. We will have, I think we have one more question there. I think we have room for just one more question, and we'll just take the last question that came in before we move on. How can we convince SMEs not to info overload with learning material? So overload of information. So how, I think the question from Mahmoud is, how do we balance between information and not overloading the information? Or I think if I may rephrase the question, Mahmoud, if you allow me, a lot of the, maybe with not sufficient experience, we moved a lot of the training material or content or workshops that we used to do in face-to-face interactions, and just the way they are, move them to digitally. I think maybe that's where the concern came from. So how do we, what are the elements to consider when we are actually looking at passing information on a digital platform? Well, so avoiding information overload. Sorry, over to you.
Okay, well, I think one of the points that's come over is that people's attention span is really quite short. They want bite-sized elements. So firstly, break up the material into lots of different chapters and modules, have little tests at the end of it, and let people come back to it. Trying to get someone to do 2 hours is too much of a slog. They really want 15, 20 minutes, half an hour, and then they can come back. So break it up is probably my primary element, and make sure there's plenty of interactive little tests in here. So when someone's done a module or a chapter, that there is useful tests, and the tests come back either to the individual, or they can correct them to get them right. But something that reinforces the learning. But I think you've got to expect people now not to be able, or not wanting to sit in front of a screen all day. We held a social event the other day by screen. It was fantastically good fun. It was a sort of quiz with a difference, an escape quiz, and you went to different countries. Only half the people turned up for it. When we did the scores at the end of the day, it got 9.5, 10 out of 10. We said to the other half, why didn't you join in? And they said, we are fatigued with being on a screen every day. The last thing we want to do is socialize. And I think the same thing comes with learning. We're all a bit fed up being on the screen. So you've got to make it a bit of fun and you've got to make it short.
Thank you so much. We have a few more questions and they're really thought-provoking, but we will take them if possible, if it's okay with you, Mr. Culhane, we will take them and send them to you and maybe we can get them answered for the participants at a later stage.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I would like to actually move now to showing you a glimpse of what the annual HR training plan for 2021 will look like. Like you would know, our vision at Eibfs is to be a leading institution in providing world-class education and training in banking and finance at local, regional, and international levels. We will be sharing a video just for a couple of minutes to show you what to expect from the new learning platform next year. So enjoy watching, and you've been our partners always, and I hope you're as excited as I am also for the training plan for next year.
What will the future look like? Well, predicting the future is hard, but there is one thing we know for sure. Nothing will remain the same. And this disruption will have a lasting impact on our health, economy, education, and life as we know it. At Eibfs, we converted this disruption into an opportunity with our digital learning solutions by training an all-time high of 30,000 learners with the launch of our own e-learning platform, Insight. But how did we define your training needs? Through a multi-stage industry-driven learning needs analysis, we have conducted a market research and innovation, LNA survey, stakeholders engagement via technical advisory committee, learning and development committee, and Emiratization committee. Last but not least, our categories focus groups meetings. Our team of experts and partners offer trainings on topics ranging from fintech and analytics, corporate banking and credit, innovation, personal development, and more. From surveying 12,000 learners, we found that 90% prefer online learning. Therefore, we are delighted to announce our 2021 learning plan with a whopping 91% increase in course offerings. In 2021, we will offer over 360 specialized courses and 1,168 training schedules. We will be introducing unique learning initiatives. These initiatives include blended learning pathways, flipped learning, augmented reality, gamifications, simulations, and much more. With you, we are moving from individual courses to continuous learning journeys, which addresses the ever-evolving learning needs of the industry. Our 2021 learning solution emphasized 3 core pillars: skilling new joiners, upskilling current staff members, and reskilling retail banking staff. Eibfs aims to deliver world-class impactful classroom and blended learning through its state-of-the-art campuses and a new era of digital learning. With the 2021 annual training plan and other initiatives in the pipeline, Eibfs is leading a new learning experience, which is designed for the modern learner.
I love the video. So good to be true, and we're really excited about seeing what it will look like next year. I would like to now hand over to Mr. Jamal Al-Jasmi. Mr. Jamal Al-Jasmi, General Manager at EIBFS, we have always been inspired by your great leadership. We echo your belief that the changing times always require or call for new competencies and skills. We would like to hear from you a few words before we close. Thank you.
Shukran, Leila. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Simon, for a very good presentation. And I was reading 5 days back about a professor in Harvard Business School. He mentioned about the VUCA word. And I was reading why he mentioned VUCA in 2014, and he mentioned that 2020 is very good example or best example for VUCA word. When he mentioned about VUCA, what stand VUCA is volatile, uncertain, the complex, and the ambiguous. Nowadays, we can see that we cannot predict what's going on tomorrow. In education, a lot of impact has happened there, and we need to live in disruption. Nowadays, as an individual or organization, we have to disrupt ourselves to be relevant what's going on. And I think 2021 is going to be better than 2020. And everybody now, all the government, all organization, especially the learning institution, they're thinking AC, you call it, after Corona. And the journey is not clear, to be honest with you. Still, a lot of organizations adopt the, we call it e-learning or blended learning, whatever we call it. But still, we are not 100% sure what's going on in 2021. The AI is really impacting our life nowadays. The artificial intelligence. It's in anywhere we have to adopt the technology, even in education, in the banking. I saw CNN just maybe 1 week back. They're talking about Alaska. There is a fight happening in the house, and Alaska heard the fight, the noise. Then she called the police. There is a problem in the house, so the police came. There is a big fighting happening in the home. So are we going to use this kind of technology impacting our life and everything? So at the end of the day, I don't want to talk more than what Simon mentioned in his presentation. Face-to-face, blended learning, whatever is coming, we are ready as the Eibfs. We plan in all scenario. We put 4 scenario. If we go back again, face-to-face, we're not going to go 100%, we'll go 30 or 50% face-to-face, then we'll go to blended learning, e-learning. We create a platform called INSEAD, and I think we will invest a lot of money on it in the future. I don't need to waste your time. Thank you very much. Simon, Leila, you were one of our students. Good job you did today, and wish you all the best in 2020, very happy and healthy year. And you know that we are celebrating our National Day within maybe 10 days from now. And we have Christmas is coming, and we have a New Year is coming. And I hope that we reach 2021 with a good health and happy, and the vaccine on the way, inshallah. So thank you, everyone. Wish you all the best in 2021. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jamal Al-Jasmi, and I am so honored to always mention that I'm a graduate of EIBFS, of course, and EIBFS has been supporting the learning of myself and many, not just obviously myself, everyone here throughout the years and throughout our banking careers. And it is our commitment to you at EIBFS to continually support your learning, and like you have seen with the annual training plan for next year, we are looking to cater to the new ways of learning. We do understand, like many of you reflected in the questions, that definitely learning calls for a new way of the new world calls for a new way of presenting learning. In fact, we previously we used to mention or think of how can we interact with the learner face to face. Not many of us as learning and development professionals have experience with how to host online workshops and maintain the same level of engagement. But yes, of course, at the end of the day, we have to always consider the element of having a session that's informative and in the same time engaging and fun. I always remember that when I first started my career in learning and development, I was told that as a child, you don't really get an option in choosing your learning subjects or choices of learning, but as an adult you get that choice. And I think in today's world, whether it's the youth or the adult, we all have the option to choose whether we want to be engaged or interested or keen on taking that information or not. So it is our duty to actually create that learning arena which caters to the new world, and not only that, to the different types of learners within this new world. We do have a lot of researchers and a lot of tips like the ones shared by Mr. Culhane on how we can create that engaging platform. Very importantly, I think we should always remember the main element, which is the information, and not just think of how do we engage or create an engaging experience. Sometimes we would notice in a lot of the e-learning programs, and you might relate, a lot of them look at how do we engage the learner but miss on the topic of information. So you find the learner busy just wanting to click and go through the course and forced to click before they can go to the next slide and the next slide. And that's not really an element of engagement or interaction if I just had to click. So I think a lot of these are things you will see that have been taken care of as part of next year's annual training plan. And I really want to thank everyone with us today. You have been a great audience. What was really lovely is that we had the same number of participants at the start of the session, and we still have all of you with us. So I really appreciate your time, and thank you so much for attending. And of course, we will continually provide the learning that you will need, because your growth is our passion. Thank you so much for being with us today. We wish you a great weekend ahead. Thank you so much.